Incredible. Michael Saylor said that Bitcoin will probably be worth $1 million per coin if MicroStrategy owns 5% of the supply. If they manage to reach 7.5%, Bitcoin will be worth $10 million per coin. And if they're lucky and get to 10% of the supply, Bitcoin will be worth $50 million per Bitcoin.
If we get the 5% of the supply, Bitcoin's probably going to be $1 million a coin. And if we get the 7.5% of the supply, Bitcoin will be 10 million a coin. And then if I'm lucky enough to grind to 10% of the supply, Bitcoin's going to be 50 million a coin. And someone will be whining that we have too much Bitcoin, but...
And it's quite possible that Michael Saylor could be wrong here. And I'll explain to you in a moment why that's the case. But first, you need to listen to one thing. Eric Trump explained that everyone in the world wants Bitcoin and said that 0.1 Bitcoin will be worth a fortune in the future.
All of us travel all over the world. Don and I travel hundreds of thousands of miles a year. I'm telling you right now, everybody in the world wants Bitcoin. I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're royal families. I don't care if you're the biggest financial institutions. Everybody wants Bitcoin. Everybody is buying Bitcoin. If you go back 12 months, there were probably less than 100 companies that were holding Bitcoin as a treasury asset that really had any, and now every single day, it's another sovereign wealth fund. Look what GameStop just did. Look what True Social did. Every single day, people are allocating billions and billions of dollars to it. You know, 0.1 Bitcoin is going to be worth an absolute fortune. And, you know, look at the OTCs. The OTCs have the lowest amount of Bitcoin on their books ever, right? I mean, the arrow goes straight down as the price of Bitcoin goes straight up. I've got a dear friend. He spoke on stage before, Simon from Metaplan, and I asked him, what is the hardest problem? And he goes, honestly, we're running out of Bitcoin. It's hard to find on the exchanges. I mean, guys, everyone wants it. Nobody wants to get rid of it. Everyone wants it as a balance sheet item. Every family that's in America. This is, you know, the whole Middle East. This is Africa. This is all of Asia. This is, you know, the Fortune 500. I mean, these are the biggest, you know, private offices. Everyone wants it. Nobody wants to get rid of it. It's incredibly powerful. You'll see value rise. Don't fear the integer. You don't have to buy anything whole integers. You can buy things in tenths of integers. And I believe that's how Satoshi actually designed the system to be bought in tenths of integers. We're just so early in the game.
And now let's talk about Michael Saylor. And before we dive in, if you're not storing your crypto offline yet, which I highly recommend, click the link in the description below the video. Protect your Bitcoin and your cryptocurrencies. Don't leave them on centralized exchanges. And if you want to achieve financial independence through Bitcoin and crypto, also click the link in the description. And what if Michael Saylor is completely wrong and Bitcoin could actually be worth far more than $50 million per Bitcoin in the future? Because if Michael Saylor really gets more than 10% of the Bitcoin supply, the price won't just be around 50 million, it will be much, much higher. Sure, there are 21 million Bitcoin, but only 6% are still left. 19.8 million have already been mined Bitcoin, mined by 2036. So in just 11 years, 99% of all Bitcoin that will ever exist will already be gone or will have already been mined. And of the 19.8 million that are available today, about 5 million are lost forever. Satoshi Nakamoto holds 1 million Bitcoin, and people like Michael Saylor are already holding 600,000 Bitcoin and have announced plans to buy another $84 billion worth to invest in Bitcoin. That means another 800,000 coins on MicroStrategy's balance sheet. And as Michael Saylor himself says, those won't move for 100 years. And if a single person holds 7.5% of the total supply and doesn't sell, what happens with the other big players? Don't forget, Michael Saylor has more Bitcoin than all nations combined. And if you understand the incentives to hoard Bitcoin, many questions become clear, especially those about what's coming our way soon. First, the billionaires. They're as agile as Michael Saylor, just hit buy and snap up. For example, 10,000 Bitcoins just like that, as soon as they understand Bitcoin and realize what's happening right now. No bureaucracy like with governments, and what's very likely to happen soon. Michael Saylor already has 600,000 Bitcoin, and soon all billionaires, or at least very many of them, will realize that this is the only way to become richer than Michael Saylor. And that is to hold more Bitcoin than he does. And the most unsettling thing about all of this is that today, there are only 2.5 million Bitcoin left on exchanges for sale. Since mid-2022, 900,000 Bitcoin have disappeared from the exchanges. And if this continues, if you look at it, there are only enough Bitcoin left on the exchanges for 4 more billionaires to buy more than Michael Saylor. And there's another question we need to clarify, which you might also have yourself. Why would other billionaires want more Bitcoin than Michael Saylor? Would they, for example, copy him? We now know that 190 publicly traded companies have Bitcoin on their balance sheets. Together with the Bitcoin ETFs, over 3 million Bitcoin have moved from exchanges into ETFs, corporate treasuries, and also onto the balance sheets of more than 180 companies. Almost every day, a company or a CEO announces, "I was wrong, we're buying Bitcoin for our company." Take a look at Mexico's third richest man, Ricardo Salinas Pliego. He has over 25% of his wealth in Bitcoin. Kathy Wood from ARK Invest is similar. And the largest asset managers and hedge funds, they control billions. BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, recommends investing in Bitcoin. So you need to pay attention to what they're doing now. BlackRock says that soon it could be risky not to have Bitcoin. They recommend a 2% allocation in Bitcoin. Charles Schwab says that without 10% in Bitcoin, you'll simply be left behind. Of more than 15,000 hedge funds worldwide, over 50% have Bitcoin and 17 of the top 25 do as well. Why is that? Because it takes years, if not decades, to reprogram someone's mind until they finally admit that a 0% allocation in Bitcoin is the wrong approach. Most of the time it's like this. They say, "I'll start small and dip my toe into the cold water with a 1% allocation," and they get themselves a small position in Bitcoin. And that's hard for many people to do for various reasons. Of course, the sunk cost fallacy plays a big role, but as soon as you have a 1% allocation in Bitcoin and see how it slowly grows in your portfolio, you have to know no one has ever bought Bitcoin, held it for 3 years, and lost money. That's why people say about Bitcoin, it's a number go up technology, which is something even the US recently acknowledged. And when your 1% becomes 2%, 3%, or even 5%, you automatically want more. And this is where the numbers get exciting. When 50% of hedge funds hold Bitcoin and billionaires like Michael Saylor alone want 7 to 12% of all Bitcoin, then things get really interesting. Because if every billionaire or fund wants to buy more than Michael Saylor, for example, it's not only impossible without causing the price to skyrocket, it's almost impossible. Let's just take a look at the math behind this. There are about 2,500 billionaires on the planet. So Bitcoin is only enough for 1 out of every 625 to buy more Bitcoin than Michael Saylor. Think about it. The richest people in the world are wealthy because they're smart. They spot trends early and, of course, take advantage of them. And do you really believe that only 0.25% of them won't come to the same realization as Michael Saylor? And don't forget, this scenario assumes that Michael Saylor stops buying at the 600,000 Bitcoin he currently has. However, Michael Saylor has announced that he wants to buy $84 billion more in Bitcoin, or rather invest that much more in it. Remember the end of 2024. He planned to invest $42 billion over 3 years. Everyone thought he was crazy, but he managed to do it in 3 months. And the second race that we will see in the future is among nations. And I can already hear what you might be thinking. Michael Saylor is a one-off that's unique. That may have been the case in 2020, but now other companies are copying him. The bears were wrong. The exciting race over the next 5 years will revolve around sovereign wealth funds, as Larry Fink from BlackRock has mentioned. They control over $50 trillion. Not just Fink, but also Coinbase insiders confirm that nations have FOMO when it comes to Bitcoin. More than 30 countries are building strategic Bitcoin reserves. US states are putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets. US federal states are adding Bitcoin to their balance sheets, and some are investing billions in Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin economies are even emerging in other countries. And just think about it. If a country were totally against Bitcoin, would it allow hundreds or even thousands of merchants to use Bitcoin? One thing is clear. The race for the last 2.1 million coins on exchanges has begun. And if we look at the Kingdom of Bhutan, it confirms many theories. Since 2019, they have been mining and buying Bitcoin for their state treasury. Now they are sitting on $1.5 billion, more than half of their gross domestic product. And we need to understand that we should buy Bitcoin now while we still can. Because if we look at the simulation, it becomes clear that the days for generational wealth could be running out quick, whether it's a whole Bitcoin, 0.1, or even 0.01 Bitcoin. That means the race for you as an individual to free your family from fiat has now begun. Assuming there are still 10 million Bitcoin available, that would be enough for 100 million families, but that number keeps shrinking and shrinking. 900,000 Bitcoin have been leaving the exchanges every 2 years since 2020. If this continues, the exchanges will be empty before 2030. And even more urgently, Michael Saylor is planning $84 billion in Bitcoin purchases in under 6 months, and a Coinbase leak shows the US government wants to buy 100 billion, and there are only about 1.5 to 2.5 million Bitcoin left on the exchanges, depending on how you look at it. That's 250 billion at a $100,000 Bitcoin price. That means Michael Saylor and the US together want to invest 184 billion in Bitcoin, and the price rises the less there is available. And the multiplier effect of $1 demand push increases the market value by 6 times, and that's a new record. In addition, Bitcoin followed the M2 money supply with a delay of 120 days, which is now exploding due to monetary expansioner demand and supply crisis of $180 billion. What happens to the price then? In the endgame, when there are 0 Bitcoins left on the exchanges, the price doesn't just go to 500,000, 5 million or 50 million, but much higher than we can probably imagine. And we will probably need fewer Bitcoins to be able to retire than many people can imagine. Only 6% of Bitcoins are left. Another 1.2 million will be mined over the next 115 years. So act now and don't let yourself be pushed out of the market. Take care of yourself. I wish you a wonderful day.